as you can see, this is to do with a project called My Child's in Pain. The project has been sponsored by WellChild, and we're still working with WellChild. And WellChild is a children's charity that works mostly with children who've got complex needs in their families, and they have nurses that provide sort of transition care and coordination. And in the way that funding comes to you through serendipitous means, we inherited a bit of money that had been left over from a previous project. And it was one of those ones where I was thinking, like, really, do I want this project? Because I've got a load of things that I should be doing, and I said yes. And I'm really glad that I said yes, because it was a fairly small amount of money. And but it's been a really valuable thing that we've been doing. And in the way that you have to say thank you to everybody, we couldn't have done it without the parents as well. Okay, so the context for this. For those of you that may have children, and those of you who don't, children are now increasingly being cared for at home. So in the good old days, if you went into hospital to have your tonsils out, you were in hospital for sort of 10 days. If you're in for longer than 10 minutes after you've had your tonsils removed, but the general system is that children will come in for a lot of procedures that used to take days of aftercare by skilled, trained paediatric nurses. And they're now being sent home into the care of the families who have support to take them home, but haven't necessarily got some of that same sort of skill and judgment that the nurses would. And they also have high levels of anxiety and tension about taking their child home after surgery or an intervention. So the responsibility for a lot of aftercare is increasingly held by parents. And one of the things that we know from talking to them generally is that pain is one of the things that they feel most worried about, because it's something they can't judge very much. They don't know quite how much pain a child might have after surgery. They don't know quite what to do. The other thing that we know that they're concerned about is managing medications. And when a child's been on medications for a long time, parents become expert, and parents are really good at managing a lot of the care that children have. But if you've been worried about taking your child in for a procedure, and then the child has the procedure, is a bit anxious afterwards, and you've got to take them home and manage medication as well, that can become tricky. And a lot of the time, because it's day case surgery, the time that the problems start to emerge are usually at night, where mum will have probably, and it nearly always is mum, and I've got no disrespect to dads, but the mum may have been up the night before worried. They're up the night the child comes home from hospital with that, and they've also often got other responsibilities to deal with. So that's the sort of context that we were sort of developing the project in. And the original aim of the small tranche of money that we got was to produce 6 high-quality videos of typical pain situations that parents were facing with children aged 2 to 6. And the idea was to come up with these user-friendly, sort of evidence-based videos that would allow us to inform and reassure parents so that they could make good decisions. The plan was that they'd be available on a dedicated web page, and they'd also, because we'd gone completely hip and trendy by that time, they were going to be on Facebook and they were going to be on YouTube. And I think we put in the proposal, and on any other social media that may become available, because we kind of wanted to look particularly cool and trendy. And we also, when we put the bid in, I kind of thought, if WellChild is really committed to doing this, and this works, there might be more opportunities to create more modules like this in the future. And also because we'd never done this sort of work before, specific work before, we also put it in as if it was going to be a pilot study for doing more work. So we were trying to set it up that way. Okay. Our team wrote a proposal in the way that we'd been taught to write proposals, which are sort of infinitely long, introduction, context, research problem, ethics, research methodology, research methods, and it sort of went to about 10 or 12 pages or whatever it goes to with references. And we were linked up to the a company called OCB Media and a chap called Nick Blackwell, who's the managing director of it, who'd worked with the NHS and WellChild in developing a programme of web-based learning called Spotting the Sick Child. And he sent his proposal through. And this was his proposal, which was somewhat different to our proposal. What Lucy and I and the rest of the team didn't know at the time was that each of these squares told us exactly what we would be doing at exactly which point in time over the next sort of 3 months of the project. So he knew, he'd logged what would be happening. So the idea at this early stage was that we were actually sort of talking a different language to the guy that was doing the video stuff. And I think there's actually a really good, it's like a complicated timeline. It's quite an interesting way of working. So our original plan, and I say original because as with all great plans, they often change. We were going to do an online survey to scope things. We were going to do two focus groups, one to produce the scripts that were going to be used to support the video resource and to create the storyboards. Second focus group to review the materials. We were then going to film and edit the videos, and at that stage we were unsure exactly whether or not they were all going to be parents or they were going to be parents and or actors. We'd then have a third focus group to review the videos, online survey, launch the resource, get it sort of out in there, and then wave gently goodbye to it. But it didn't quite work that way. It was a really sound plan. It was the best plan that we could put together, and we had quite a short time frame to put it together. But the focus groups were really, really difficult to convene. As with any parents, trying to get parents into a room together can be quite tricky. So we decided within the proposal that we'd also have opportunities to do email or post or telephone working. So what actually happened was we still did an online survey. We did quite a bit of engagement with parents, and we had a steering group who we worked with in terms of the production of the scripts and storyboards. We worked with parents through telephone and through email to review the materials before the videos were produced. We engaged with parents with the filming, but we didn't film as many parents as we'd liked, so in the end we used actors for some of it. We then reviewed the videos, we launched the resource, we endorsed it, and it's still fairly similar, but the work still goes on because the resource is only as active as you are in actually trying to keep it in people's attention, so it takes quite a lot of time to do that. We had, I can't remember if it was 3 or 6 months, but we had a very short space of time to bring the project in from start to finish, and it wasn't feasible within that time to go through NRES. So we went through university ethics at both UCLan and Edge Hill. And although that worked fine, and it was an ethical project, actually gaining recruitment of parents was more difficult because we didn't have that same access through healthcare settings, which would have been useful. And it's another lesson learned that we should really resist projects that push you to go too fast for sort of gaining the type of data that you actually want. In terms of the resource, one of the things we realised quite early on is if we were going to have something on YouTube and Facebook and all the rest of the social media that people could access from anywhere within the world, we had to make sure that whatever we were saying was safe and wasn't going to kill somebody somewhere else and was going to be accessible by people and understandable by people who were accessing it, not within a British culture perhaps. And we also had to work out who was liable. And with all these things, the liability tends to come back to the principal investigator, which kind of was me, unless you make it really clear within your proposal and within your contract how that responsibility is going to be shared, because I really would quite like a house at the end of a project rather than somebody taking it. And there was also stuff about intellectual property in terms of who would have it. Was it going to be UCLan because they were the lead? Was it going to be UCLan and Edge Hill? And if it was those two, how we were going to fight amongst ourselves? Was it Well Child because they were providing the money, or was it to do with the media company that we were working with? And in the end, we've come up with this sort of shared agreement thing that we all loosely own it and can't do anything with it without asking other people. So, but these things are kind of interesting when you get going. Okay. Probably the most important thing that you have to do in any project, and particularly in this one, was lots and lots and lots of communication. We were communicating, I mean, Lucy and I work a lot together, and we communicate really well with each other and with parents and professionals because we understand the language that we're talking with each other. Communicating with the web designer, although he was is absolutely delightful, every now and then I had to say, could you tell me what that means? Because some simple things like a storyboard, I think I know what a storyboard was, but I really wanted to be sure that I knew what he thought a storyboard was. So there was lots of issues like that. We consulted very frequently and very regularly. And any of the changes that we made as a result of the discussions that we had kept having to come back to the fact that these were going to be 6 videos that were going to be information resources for parents. So it had to be fit for a generic purpose. Because if we're saying it's for after your child aged 2 to 6 has had is in pain having had some sort of day case intervention. They could have had something done to their ear, they could have had a tracheal dilation, they could have had their tonsils removed, they could have had surgery, some sort of surgery on their leg, they could have had a whole range of different things. So the advice that we would give for post-operative care, post-tonsillectomy would perhaps be very, very specific. This had to be quite generic, and that was a real challenge. So we had to think about sorts of decisions about the level and the content that we included so that it didn't overwhelm people, but it actually was useful. I had to think about who would do the introduction, and at one point they were saying, you can do the introduction. I thought, well, nobody will know who I am, and I'm probably not the face of young mothers. We talked about things like voiceovers and colour schemes, the length and the style of the video, the length and the type of illustration, logos, a whole range of different things. Writing storyboard scripts. And this is said, could you write a script for a storyboard? And we went, yes. What does that entail? So we were kind of working out how many words. So you worked it out as to how you had to write the number of words for the amount of time that you actually wanted to use. So we looked at word limit. We looked at, because we decided in the end that we weren't going to do the voiceovers, we were going to have somebody else, we had to almost give them stage directions as to which bits they were going to have to emphasize so that those particular messages got through very specifically. And we had to be both precise and generic. And we sliced the storyboards into quite small components. And once we'd got the storyboard written or the script written, these are the things that we wanted to get across to people. We then had to work out which bits we wanted illustrated and what we wanted to illustrate them with and how they could be safely illustrated. So it was fascinating, and we learned a lot as we went on. So this was the pink bit that you can see there is kind of the initial sort of word script or a word script that we wrote. And then the storyboard is the bit that you can see at the bottom, which is where we sort of sliced it into elements that either, and then the sort of the illustrations that would go with it. We were slightly aghast when we got our first set of illustrations through, and I wasn't quite sure what I was imagining we would have, but these were the ones that came through. And this is for My Child is in Pain, and it thought like my child's having an absolutely smashing time sort of thing. So whereas the research team could sort of absorb it in terms of the style, we knew that these were things that we were going to have to send out to the parents. So we had to sort of do quite a bit of preparation to the parents to say, we know these show pictures of children having fun with mum and reading stories, but it's the actual style. And the feedback that we got back from the parents was that they didn't really like any of them very much. The one that they liked, or they hated the least, was the one in the middle. But they said that looks like an ordinary day at home when they feel frazzled rather, and they thought if it was that sort of style, it would devalue the pain sort of message. And what they really wanted was something much more real, so less cartoony. So we then tentatively fed that back to the designer and the illustrator and people. So these are some of the things that they said. In terms of the scripts that we sent out to them and the interviews that we were doing with them as well. So the feedback we got on the illustrations were those ones that I was saying, like they were too smiley, it doesn't look real. From the interviews that we did with people, and we interviewed a number of parents about the areas that we thought that were important to include in the video, we were asking about the concerns that they had, what were the questions that they had that they didn't know the answers to. What should we call the resource? Because at that point we were just calling it the resource or the thing. And one of the parents came up with, why don't you call it My Child's in Pain, because that's what you're asking about. So it also had to be something that was relatively easy to find on the internet. And we had questions like, or questions the parents were unsure about, like, I didn't know what was causing the pain and whether or not I should worry about it, or I didn't know how long the medicines would work for. I'm still slightly getting my head around this, but illustration is expensive. I mean, everything you do within research is expensive. But we were told that we were limited to having 2 families. I'd imagine that we would have 5 different families or 6 different families so that we could be ethnically diverse and gender balanced and all sorts of different things. But we were limited to 2 families. So we had to look at things like ethnicity, the gender of the child, who was going to be doing what, and whether or not they were going to be siblings. And these are some of the early examples of the illustrations that were developed after the parents had had some input. And they're much more pictures that you can actually relate to, I think. We had to look at what logo we'd have. I don't think Lucy will mind. She said, I don't mind, let's just have anything. So and I was going, no, I don't like this one. So I'm kind of obsessive about illustrations and things. And it's always good to have somebody that is less obsessed. So these were some of the ones that came through. And we kind of looked at them and fed back, and we asked the parents, and they gave us feedback. And having sort of said that the green face with the writing up there was the thing that we liked the best, and we thought that was job done, they then sent us lots more versions of it to choose from. So every now we thought we'd nailed a decision down, it came back. So in the end, we chose the one at the bottom, the big one. We then got to the point where we were building the website and we were trying to do wireframes that would be ways of fitting things in. And they asked us how we were going to do this. And the first time they asked us about a wireframe, I hadn't got a clue what it was. But this was sort of the basic navigation of the website. So what we'd been funded for was a wireframe like this, like a single page that had everything on it, but wouldn't all fit onto the screen of your computer. So we then went into sort of hyper Weedle mode and sort of said, please, can we have something more? It would be lovely if we could have something more. And they kind of, at the web company, they kind of gave in and did some more work on it. And we ended up with a series of these wireframes that were going to be very specific. So we had an opening wireframe that would then lead us through to other ones. So this is the wireframe that is linked to the how do I know if my child is in pain. And by this time, we'd managed to ask Alice Roberts, who just had a baby and was sort of more of the demographic age group, the lady from the science stuff on the telly, to actually do the introductions. And then having spent all the time working on the illustrations, the web page then came back with a picture that most of us had seen because it's a clip art image of a child looking particularly miserable. And what we really wanted to do was sort of almost promote an image of a child not being too terribly miserable. And we then spent quite a lot of time trying to get the navigation right, because you can have the best website in the world and the best resource, but if you can't get to it, it's hopeless. So we had these, in the orange bit, there was a bit where you could play the video or you could download a PDF, because some of the parents said they wanted a PDF. When we showed it to the parents, they didn't understand, they didn't pick some of that stuff up. And bearing in mind, your child is likely to be sort of screaming or crying or sort of distressed in bed. The last thing you want is a difficult to navigate website. So we went through various different iterations of it, and we were getting possibly slightly desperate at this stage. And then Lucy said, why don't we ask them to click here to find out more? So the next one came back, and it had just got this sort of really nice circle that told you what to do. And it reduced everything down to something that was really, really simple, that was great. And the parents that used it at the time and were giving us feedback absolutely loved it. We probably would have done better if we'd done a website design course before we'd started, but now we could probably run a website design course. Working remotely with lots of different parents was really good, and we did a lot of remote working that way, and that worked fine with this project, and we do that quite a lot anyway now. If we hadn't have had engagement from the families, it would have been hopeless. We took quite a lot of engagement from professionals, not just in the UK, but I sent it out to, I've got quite a lot of colleagues that I know internationally. So I was saying to them, please can you try it? Please can you check? Because if they're in the United States, I wanted to be sure that if they checked it, it made sense in the US of A, and the language wasn't wrong. We checked it in a few countries in Europe, USA, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, and got some feedback from other people as well, because before it went live I wanted to be sure that it was safe, or we wanted to be sure that it was safe. And that bit can take quite a long time. That wasn't really built into the funders' original plans. And even when the project was over, it's not over, because we keep being asked for what the Google metrics are for the site, you know, how many people travel to it, how long they're in there, what bits they actually look like. We're also asked for things like where it's actually being used, where it's been embedded. It's now on a lot of discharge information sheets and things like that. So that's kind of a very quick overview of something that we were involved in. There's a class that seems to want to come in fairly soon. So if anybody's got any questions, I'd be delighted to take them, or I can wait outside and be available outside.
Did you have problems trying to condense the files? I'm not very technical, by the way, but with the huge files.
That was the good thing about having a web designer, because he took. We worked on the editing together, and he used file compression packages to actually make it such that people could actually upload it quickly on their iPhone or a slow connection. So that was one of the kind of service standards that we had with them right at the beginning. And because we've now got more little videos that run for about 45 seconds, people can just go straight to the bit that they want, so they don't have to sit through. 5 minutes of video it's really a long time. I mean, I thought I was one of these people that could sort of hadn't got the attention span of a gnat, but when it's on the screen, you just want to get to that information now. So the 6 5-minute videos wouldn't have worked anyway. So we've now got lots more videos that people go to much more directly. So if it's to do with a medicine, they can go to that bit of the medicine advice. So that bit comes up really quickly. And that was one of the things we tested internationally. It sounds dramatic, you know, we asked our mates to help. It was an international testing of the product, yeah. Yeah.
Have you got one of those pop-ups that ask the parents for feedback and that
Yeah.
is useful? And is that feedback, are you updating this as you go along?
At the moment, we do get that they can fill in the survey. Very few of them have done. We haven't got the funding to update it, and when codeine was withdrawn from use with children, although I knew we hadn't got anything that said codeine on there, I sat through all of the videos just to make absolutely 100% sure that there wasn't anything like that there in any way. Because we designed it to be generic, it should have quite a long lifespan, because the only 2 drugs that we talk about are ibuprofen and paracetamol. And we basically say use them in the way that you've been instructed. And the only 2 drugs that we felt that were safe to talk about were those 2, because there's so much tension about any of the other medications that are used, and we said that these are used generically. But yes, we would like to update it.
Update on usage in terms of how many people are accessing or?
Yeah, and it's pretty good for For a resource of this size, it seems to be pretty, I can't remember what the latest statistics are, but they've been fairly consistent. What you really need is somebody that will be dedicated to actually following it through and pushing it, and we're doing this sort of part-time, and one of the reasons I chose to talk about it today is it's another way of kind of talking about it to other people. I'm now a member of the British Pain Society Information, Communication and Technology groups that presented it at the BPS not long back. So you have to keep using those sorts of opportunities to keep it highlighted. But the hospitals that do use it as part of their discharge information leaflets say that it's been very good. So we took it to the nurse specialists groups, things like that.
How did you select your families that were going to help you and develop the children, and what was your criteria for selection? How many were interested in helping them? How did you select them?
We had less time and fewer families than we would have hoped to have recruited, and that was one of the problems I said at the beginning, was because we'd gone through, only got university ethics. We went through local play groups, we put adverts through the university's intranets, we spoke to people within any setting that we felt we could contact parents that would have had a child who might have had surgery, might have had day case admission within the last 12 months, I think it was. And the child had been aged 2 to 6 at the time, so they could have been a bit older than that. Anything else?
Okay, well, we could just express our thanks to both.
Well, thank you for
and if
inviting
there's
me.
no more questions.
Thank you.